Today is November 28th, 2011. My name is Kerry King, and I'm here with Tony Hilliard at the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia, where we're both volunteers. With us today is Mr. Allan Russell Bullman, a veteran who's agreed to share his personal experiences during his service in World War II. This interview is being recorded for the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project through the efforts of the Atlanta Vietnam Veterans Business Association. Mr. Bullman, would you please give us your full name and address, and also tell us your date of birth and a little bit about your life while you were growing up?
My name's Allan Russell Bullman. I live at 150 Bay Colt Road in Alpharetta, Georgia. I live with my daughter and for the last, a year then, roughly. And I lived up on the lake for 23 years, Lake Lanier, due to my daughter's help. But anyway, I was born in Plainfield, New Jersey, 88 years ago, and will be in December.
Congratulations.
And I graduated from high school in 1942. I wasn't the most wonderful student in the class. I was more than average, but not much. And when I graduated, I knew that I probably wasn't college material. And secondly, I didn't have the money to go to college. So what happened after high school, I got a job in a machine shop using what they call hand screw machines for the war effort. And before that, I gotta back up a minute, my father, I consulted with him that I wanted to go into service. This was 1942, and I wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force. So he took me down to Newark Airport for a pre-physical to see if I could make the services. So I had the whole physical, and when I got through, they said, Mr. Bullman, you won't get in the service, you have a heart murmur. And they said, when you go home, don't do anything strenuous. Don't play basketball, don't do all that stuff. Well, that was the end of that. So I said, well, if I can't be a pilot, I'll just wait to be drafted. So I kept to my job, and then I got the draft thing, and I went down for my physical for that. And
when was that, Mr. Bullman?
Huh?
When did you get your draft notice?
It was in 1942. I don't remember the date. You know, it just escapes me.
Okay.
I think it was in the summertime, and I went in the physical, and I got to the heart guy, and he says, I had written down that I had a heart murmur and that sort of thing. And he says, you don't have a heart murmur anymore. So I also have a bent right arm because of the left one's straight, but I was either born with this or the birthing caused it, and nobody knew it till I was 5 years old. So when I got to the end and we're ready to stamp you into service, one guy says to the other, you think that bent arm will keep him out of the Navy? No, I got end. Stamp of the Navy. So anyway, I went to boot camp up in Rhode Island, on an island up there, and was chosen to go to sonar school down in Key West, Florida, and learn how to be a submarine detector. And I was there for several weeks learning how to be a sonarman. And then I was assigned a ship, and that ship was in Charleston, South Carolina. And I went by train up there, and it was a destroyer escort. Do you folks know what a destroyer escort is?
Well,
basically,
my Marine buddy may, but I don't. So
you know what a destroyer is?
Yes, sir.
Well, this was mass-produced, cheap destroyer for convoy duty. It had little armament, it was slow, and it would rock in a bathtub, and the top speed was 21 knots. So all they did was just make the ship cheaper so they could mass produce them quickly. And strictly for convoy duty, because, you know, they weren't heavy duty for fighting. So I joined the ship in Charleston, and our first assignment was to escort the cruiser Philadelphia to New York. And of course, we had to pass Cape Hatteras, where the storms are plentiful. Now, this was my first experience on a ship, and I was a sonarman, but like lots of organizations, when they had just come back from their shakedown cruise. So I was boarding then, and they had too many sonarmen. You know, I was first class sonarman, and so they assigned me to another duty, which was a helmsman. And we started out on this ship for New York, and it was rough as the dickens. And of course, you know what happened. The first thing you know, I was seasick as a dog. And the quartermaster was in the cabin with me where the helm was, and he'd grab the helm and I'd go over the rail and vomit, and, you know, come back. And another little part of this thing was you were on for 4 hours, and every hour you had to go down to the stern of the ship, underneath, you know, under the deck, where they had an after steering station for emergencies. They didn't even have a chair in there, it was just deck. And, you know, I went down there and sat down, and this ship was going up and down and side, and I vomited all over the deck. You know, the guy that came to relieve me took one look and said, "Oh my God." So, and then I had to go back up on the helm for an hour and then back down there for an hour. Well, it was a darn miserable start, but I got over it.
What was the name of the ship?
The USS Fessenden, Fessenden. He was a man who was a radio expert and invented superheterodyne. It was a mixing of two frequency years ago to make a better transmission, and that was what it was named for. So we got to New York, and then we were assigned to a convoy to take it overseas, and then I was a sonarman. By this time they got rid of the extra ones, and I was on my sonar duty, and it was I can't remember all the details of these trips, but it was sort of uneventful. It was kind of rough and so forth.
And who
we
did
went
you
to
say you were
Casablanca.
escorting?
Huh?
Who were you escorting for the first time?
Well, a whole bunch of ships. I mean, you know, ammunition ships, troops, you know, oil, you know, everything. It
And
was
you
a
were
gigantic-
escorting them from where to where?
We were taking them from Norfolk to Casablanca,
I see.
and this was supplying the North African campaign, the supplies. So we got to Casablanca, and, you know, we're there for a few days. I had liberty in Casablanca, which I don't recommend for vacation. And then we went back and got another convoy, and the same trip, but this was in the wintertime. And the water was so rough in that Atlantic that some days we didn't make a mile ahead because the freighters and ships were so slow in the first place, and they couldn't make headway, and neither could we. I mean, because you just bob around on the surface. It took us 20 days to get from Norfolk to Casablanca. And because this ship was so new, we ended up not having enough food because the ship was so long, and the quartermasters didn't get enough food, and we end up eating rice and prunes. And that made it a very busy men's room, believe me. But, you know, it was a rough trip, weather-wise. And so basically, this was my convoy experience. And then we were assigned to a group called a killer group, which was a baby flat top named the Mission Bay, which were made to hunt submarines. And they were a smaller carrier, obviously cheaper. And what they did was take these wonderful DEs, and we guarded the aircraft carrier, you know, in front from submarines. And what they would do was every day they had Wildcat fighters and some torpedo bombers, and they would go out hunting submarines on the surface. And if they found one, which they did once, and we heard it on the radio, the pilot dove on the submarine, and the submarine shot him down. And it was a very tough experience to listen to. And one other thing that happened to us during this time, we went all over the Atlantic, and I'm going to show you this. This thing is falling apart, it's all like me. There's 2 pages here. This is all the places we went. Now, I found out later this was not supposed to be done in the Navy during the war, but I just kept it as a sort of a little diary on, you know, where I had been. There's another half page on that. And that's all the places we went during the time I was in the Navy. And
Now, I noticed that it has months and days, but it doesn't say years. Can you
the
kind of
year
tell us?
is right on the top.
It is,
Yeah,
at the top of
yeah.
the page?
I think it's 1943.
Okay, so, I want to be delicate with, okay, I see, now I
You see it now?
So it
And-
looks like your first Charleston trip that you were talking about was October 12th, 1943?
Yeah, I don't remember these dates. I mean, that's why I wrote them down. I just can't remember all that stuff.
And
So-
it looks like were you aboard this same ship the whole time?
2 years and 4 months.
Amazing.
So,
All right, go ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah. So one of the things that happened when we were with this killer group is when the planes took off, one of the ships would drop behind in plane guard detail, they called it, where they when the pilots took off and landed, in case anything happened, we would be back there to pick somebody up, you know, the pilot. Well, it happened when we were back there, and this Wildcat came into a landing, and you know they have these hooks that they hook them with. Well, something happened, and it didn't hook right, and they put a fence up of wire, you know, cables, so that the plane ahead of them doesn't get hit. This pilot jumped over the barrier and landed on another plane with a pilot standing on the wing, getting out. And he and the plane were knocked overboard. And as we came up to them, we could see him bobbing in the water in his life jacket. And we had a chief petty officer named Jesse Jewell, and dove in the water, in the ocean, and the waves were like 6 feet, 10 feet high, and swam to this pilot. And his head was in the water, and he lifted his head up, and we got to him, you know, with a lifeboat, the sailors did, and they brought him on board, and they laid him on the deck on his stomach. They could see all these blue welts on his back where the plane hit him, and he was dead.
I see.
It was just a darn shame, you know, it was one of those things that you don't like to happen. So then what we had to do was take his body back to Newfoundland, is where we took him, and, you know, and then rejoined the.
Was that the normal procedure when somebody was killed at sea?
Well, it was on a small ship. Now, my ship was only 306 feet long, and, you know, it had 209 men, and there's just there's no place to put a dead body. Now, on a battleship or a carrier or something like that, they would have facilities for that. But we didn't have anything. We didn't have a doctor or anything on the ship, so.
And this accident that occurred, was that on the USS Mission Bay?
Yes,
It was.
yes, it was.
Okay, and the pilot, the one that was killed, was he the one flying the aircraft that missed the hook, or was he the one
He
standing?
was the one standing on the plane that had already landed.
Let's see, did you know his name?
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't remember it.
I see. Okay, continue. I
Yeah,
didn't
so-
mean to interrupt you.
Then what happened, and again, the sequence, please, gentlemen, I'm not sure of all that, but we also came across, as we were searching, we got a submarine contact on the sonar. And, you know, a ping whoop, we were called ping jockeys. And, you know, you send out this signal from your projector, and it would, when you got school of fish awake, would give you the same signal, you know, so you had to sort of determine whether this thing was a whale, a school of fish, or a wake, or a submarine. And we do that by going back and forth over and seeing what the size was and how it was moving, and it was a submarine. So we broke off of the formation and followed the submarine and attacked it with depth charges. And we also had another weapon for submarines, which were called hedgehogs. And on the front deck was a series of pipes, and, you know, like 25 of them, and they'd put these bomb-like missiles on these pipes and then fire them, and they would go up in the air and go straight down in the ocean, and they'd only go off if they hit something. And this was very helpful to the sonar people and the people trying to find the submarine, and 2 of them went off. And what they were very small charges, and what they would do was put a hole in the hull of the submarine. You know, not destroy it, but put a hole. So what happened with this, we think the missiles put a couple holes in the submarine, and it just filled with water and sunk. And this area was like 6,000 feet or something, you know, and it just went down. And we know it went down because we were there for days, and there was an oil slick a mile wide from the submarine. And there was a little debris, but not much. So we accomplished the mission in this particular case. And, so that was my first battle star, and the other one was actually before that. On one of these trips to Casablanca, or we went into the Mediterranean to Bizerte to deliver supplies for the convoy. It's there someplace in
Yes, sir,
that
there's
list.
an entry here, your number 16 entry
Yeah.
on page 1 that says Bizerte, April 22nd of 1944.
Well, what happened when we got into the Mediterranean, our friends, the Germans, sent torpedo bombers to get the merchant ships, as many as they could. And So we were trying to guard the convoys, and because we had two first-class sonarmen, and I was only second class, I wasn't on the unit in general quarters. I had another job. And what they did is put me in the radar shack as a talker from the radar to the captain on the flying bridge. So I would just relay the information they needed. And in this radar shack, there were no portholes, no anything. So everything is banging and, booming, and everything is, our big guns, 3-inch 50s, were firing at the torpedo bombers, and 20 millimeters, and suddenly we heard this tremendous explosion. And, there was several of us in the radar shack, and we got a little sweaty, and the ship started, leaning a little bit, and we thought to ourselves, my God, we're going down. But what it was, unfortunately, was one of the merchant ships blew up very near us. It just blew to pieces. I don't know whether, I think it was an ammunition ship. And, just total loss for everybody on the thing. And so we actually shot down one of the German Junker 88s and got credit for it, and that was my second battle star. And luckily we didn't get hit or anything. We did a lot of firing and things like that. But so those were the two battle stars I had in the war.
Could I ask you a question here, just for clarification
Sure.
purposes? It appears from just hearing what you're saying is that you escorted both civilian and military convoys.
Oh, yeah, yes. Yeah, well, actually, when you say military, we didn't know what was on the ships, really. Nobody gave us a list or anything in it, especially enlisted men. We didn't know a lot of anything, really, most of the time. But, which made no difference. It wouldn't have done us any good anyway, but, so it was a combination of ships, of whatever they needed, in oil or troops or ammunition, and so I believe this ship that blew up was ammunition. I mean, it was just a tremendous explosion.
Were you at all involved in anything relating to the D-Day invasion?
No, not at all. In fact, I never got to Europe except Gibraltar. I was hoping I'd get to see England or, somewhere, but we never got to Europe. We got to all these other places, Cape Town, South Africa, Recife, Brazil, Bahia, Brazil, Cuba, the Azores, Dakar, French West Africa, and went through the Panama Canal. So we were in Pearl Harbor. The Germans surrendered, and we were sent to the Pacific. And we went through the Panama Canal into San Diego, and then we were sent out to Honolulu. And as we were anchored in Honolulu Harbor, the Japanese surrendered. We didn't know the atomic bomb or anything, but, they surrendered. So that night, we were anchored out there, and the flares went up like, a fireworks display with all the ships in that harbor. And so we were all tickled, but we were then assigned to go out to the Marshall Islands. And what we did there was guard Japanese soldiers that were bypassed on the island of Woji, and that's listed in there. It's just a little atoll, and, just a little lagoon, and this moon-shaped little flat island with practically nothing on it. except a few coconut trees. And the Japanese had been shot at and, bombed, but nobody had ever landed on there. So they just figured that they weren't important enough so they just marooned them there. And the Japanese had Korean men as slaves. They actually had all these Korean men to work for them. And it was a real tough situation for the Koreans. So anyway, we anchored in the lagoon, and it was awfully hot there. And we all dove off the ship to have a swim, and then the Finns came in, and we were out of that water and nothing flapped. And the only swimming we did from then on was take the whaleboat in on the beach, and the water was like bath water. It was so warm. So what we had to do when we got there, this little, I don't know how to describe it, but the Japanese had these, not a whaleboat, but this kind of a boat goes up in the middle like a, front or bow. And it was like a whaleboat, and this came out from the wharf they had there. And this Japanese admiral in his white uniform came aboard to talk to the captain. Of course, we didn't have anything to do with it. But he was thin as a rail, and because of the fact that they didn't have any food, and the only thing that they could do was fish with grenades. Go out in the surf, throw a grenade, and pick up the dead fish. And, it was just, they were starving. And he came on board to consult the captain. And so we were there for, I forget how many days, and what happened, one of the things that happened, every day we would go in with one lieutenant and a couple of petty officers and put up the American flag. It was just a barren, stinking place, if you pardon the remark, just terrible. And these Japanese would stand by these little roads and glare at you, and we'd go marching in, the three of us, put the flag up, and we found out a little later on that there was an old tank sitting there with a 30 millimeter machine gun, well oiled, sitting on top of it. They weren't supposed to have it, just the grenades for fishing. So that made you feel a little uncomfortable. And then the next thing that happened, they had gasoline drums on this little wharf, 55-gallon drums of, I think it was aircraft fuel. And the Korean, to get to this, what they did first was bring a ship in and load the Japanese all on the ship. And
When you say they, you mean the U.S. Navy?
huh?
When you say they came in and loaded all the Japanese, you mean the U.S. Navy
Yes,
did?
yeah.
Okay.
And
And this
I
was
don't-
on the island
Yes.
of Waji?
Huh?
This was on the island of Waji?
Woji, yeah.
Woji, that's
Yeah.
W-O-T-J-E
Yeah, yeah.
in the Marshalls?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And so they took them off first, so they didn't want the Koreans to get more trouble with the Japanese, and so anyway, they took them off, and the Koreans were left. And what happened was that these Koreans opened the 55-gallon drum of fuel and tried to make a fire out of it, and this one guy got burned, and they brought him, I forget whether they went in and got him or what, and he came on board, and he was walking, and his skin was just hanging off him. I mean, he was just, I don't know how he could even walk. I mean, he was just, and they sent in a PBY to take him, off the island. And that was a very uncomfortable feeling for I don't know how we ever made out or anything, you know, so. So eventually then, in a few days, they took off the Koreans. Where they took them, I suppose, was Korea, I don't know, I didn't know. So we left then, of course, the war was over, so I didn't have any sonar duties. We didn't have to ping anymore. So they made me master-at-arms of the mess hall in the ship down below, which I knew nothing about, but we had we had gone to one of the other, and in Weetalk, I think it was, and picked up some rock sailors, which people who had been on the island for the war. And of course, they made some of them mess cooks. And so I had these rock sailors trying to serve food, and they got sick as dogs, you know, I mean, they just, they were up on the rail, and I was standing there with a stanchion, putting food on the trays, and I got sick, because we'd been there for a month, and when you get your sea legs again, until you do, I was vomiting in a can there and serving food, so that was a pretty...
Not exactly appetizing for
Oh,
people coming
yeah.
through the line, was it?
So, you know,
It looks like that was in December of 1945
yes,
when
yes.
you were in
We were
Enewetak.
going to San Diego.
Just looking at, this is a very interesting diary or whatever,
Well, you know,
whatever
it's
your
yeah.
Itemization. It appears to me, just glancing at it from what I see, and I want to ask you if you can confirm this or not, that in the war, you were basically in the Atlantic.
Yes, yes.
For the entire, up until about June of 1945, and then, or July of 1945, and then they put you in the Pacific.
Yes, yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how did you get from the Atlantic? Did you go through the Panama Canal? to get?
Canal, yeah.
I see. I also see that you were in several islands in the Marshalls, that you were in Balboa in Panama.
Yes.
Kwajalein, does that ring a bell with you?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Actually, it was, I think it's one of the Marshall Islands, but I don't remember anything that, you know, we were there either for supplies or, I don't know the reason we were there. I can't remember anything, you know, these were very tiny islands. And as a matter of fact, one other little thing that's kind of interesting, when we were at Woji, you know, it was boring and hot and hard to sleep. And what they did was, the island of Woji was this curving piece of land with the port side, if you look at it, had coconut trees, and the other side is where the Japanese and the Koreans were. And this part was sort of a little water between, was isolated. So that while we were there, we had nothing to do. So some of us took guns. You know, we had a few guns on board. We had a Thompson submachine gun and, you know, just a couple weapons. Well, that's something else I want to tell you. Well, we went ashore and shot coconuts down with these guns, you know, with just something to do. But we finally decided, heck, this is ridiculous. So we took the submachine gun and just riddled the tree down. The whole tree would fall over and we'd get the coconuts without holes. But, you know, that was the only entertainment we had. So, let's see, what I was going to tell you something.
You're going to
else.
tell us about weapons.
Oh, I know what it was. I was almost killed 3 times on that ship, and it had nothing to do with the enemy. Nothing. It was my own stupidity twice, and the guy that was on watch with me on sonar, his stupidity. What we did, we were one time, I don't know where we were, what harbor, New York or Norfolk, and we had some problems with the sonar unit. Now, none of us were electricians or, you know, anything to do with, we knew how to run the equipment. And so something went wrong, I have no idea, and we took the bolts out of this electronic unit, slid out, you know, and all the tubes and all the stuff were in there. And the picture of the ship is in there. I want to show you.
Yes, sir.
Here it is. And the sonar shack is the front of that flying bridge. You see the front part that it had no portholes, but the front of that flying bridge was a room across the width of the ship. It was about as wide as I could reach with both arms, and no portholes, and just a door on the left. And our equipment was in there. And that's where we spent our watches hunting submarines. And I was on with this young man. I don't remember his name or, you know, anything about him. I can picture him in my mind still. So one of us would be on the stack for an hour, and the other fellow would be sitting on the deck. There was no chair or anything. He'd just sit there with his back. And then he would relieve you for an hour. We were on 4 hours. And right next to him was a rack with his Thompson submachine gun. You know, supposedly for boarders, or you know what. Of course, it was never used for that. And this was a kid that had come on the ship during one of our trips, and he was sitting there and he picked up the submachine gun, and he was sitting on the floor with it between his legs, like this, and I'm sitting on the stack right here, you know, doing my job, and he's within, you know, 20 inches of me, and he brings the thing back, the bolt, bang! It went off and just missed my head and splattered on the overhead. Well, you know, this was, and a little smoke, or, you know, and I was too shocked to be scared. I didn't know, you know.
So he obviously chambered around without the
yes,
safety.
Yes, was
being
left in it, you know.
Right, yeah.
And so the officer of the watch, of course, the flying bridge was right, you just step outside and he was conning the ship. There was someone there all the time. And we had one of these systems with the pipes that you talk through. That's what we had. And somebody said, "What happened?" "Sorry, sir, the gun fell down." And that's all that ever came of it. But, you know, but the other two times were both the fact that when we were looking at this equipment, and I was leaning over looking at it, and I had my dog tag with a chain around my neck, and the thing dipped down into this 200-plus thing, and both arms on the steel, and I went down in a heap. And, you know, it didn't do anything to me. And then secondly, I was stupid with that, down in the lower sound room where the projector was and the keel of the ship, they had all this electronic equipment, and we had to clean it every week. And so to clean it, we had to take out fuses, you know, fuses about that long.
Uh-huh.
Well, smart old Al didn't have a fuse puller. So he reaches in and pulls this fuse. Why I survived, I don't know, but somebody must have been watching over me. But those were my two stupid moves, plus my friend.
Near-death experience.
Yeah, my death experiences. So anyway, after that, you know, after we got back to Honolulu and then back to San Diego, we went through the canal again and up to New York, where I was mustered out in Long Island. And that was my career.
Did you ever do any later military service after that?
No, I didn't. I got a, you know, I went to work for Union Carbide, but for 36 years.
Tell us about that. What did you do at Union Carbide?
Remember I told you I wasn't a college graduate, but I went to Carbide. In fact, a friend of mine that Lynn knows Fred, was also rooming with us for a while. He was in high school with me, and we both were looking for jobs, you know, and so we ended up at Union. We went a couple places, and we ended up at Union Carbide, and I wanted a job as in the lab. You know, I thought it would be interesting. So we both got the job, and this was in 1946.
And where?
Bound Brook, New Jersey.
So you stayed in New Jersey?
Yep, I was still in New Jersey. And so I got the job in the lab and as a lab assistant, and I did pretty well. I enjoyed the job, and it was interesting. And I, again, worked with doctors of chemistry and chemical engineers and all this kind of stuff. So I knew I wasn't going to become president of the company, but, you know, it was a good job, and I think I did pretty well with it, because I continued to do good work in developing some of the plastics we were making. And so they made me a technician, the next step up. And I got a lab assistant given to me. And then they made me a chemist, a title of chemist. I got 3 patents that I was there for plastics.
Wow.
And I have a chapter of a book that I wrote for the testing, I can't remember the word, it's a United States testing service. I can't think of the name of it right now. But we have the book at home with a chapter I wrote on making plastic sealants and things. And so they said, what do you want to be, a chemist or a chemical engineer? I said, oh, I'm a chemist. So they used to send me on customer service with salesmen around the country. You know, Detroit, Chicago, you know, all the great places.
But the whole time you lived in New Jersey, the whole
Yes,
time?
all the time in New Jersey.
And you got married what year after the war?
1950.
And what was your wife's name?
Lillian. And
Kids?
Huh?
I know you got one, I see her here. How many kids do you have?
4, 2 boys, 2 girls. The Lynn is the only family member. We both moved from New Jersey down here. When they retired me from Union Carbide in 1983, it was a bit early because it was a slowdown period, and you know, I didn't have any degree, and you know, they just said you got to retire. So I got it. I got a job down in Atlanta in another plastic place, and so Lillian and I moved down to Georgia, bought a house, and I went to work for this place, but it only lasted a year. It was a small place, and we just didn't hit it off for some reason. They said, sorry, Al, we're gonna let you go.
Yeah.
So we stayed there with the house, and we went down in 1983, and my wife got breast cancer in 1986 and died.
I'm sorry.
Which was just a terrible thing. And what happened was that
So no new girlfriends or wives
Huh?
after that? No new girlfriends or wives after that?
well, yeah, I had a girlfriend for a while, but
So did you basically, after that episode, you basically retired and have stayed retired
yeah,
since then?
I retired from Carbide in 1983, but I got this job down here, and then I went to work as a watchman at the airport,
That's
you
it.
know, as a guard or whatever you call it, and at that time, after my wife died, my daughter had moved down, of course, with her husband and her child. And I went into real estate, which was the dumbest thing I ever did in my life. My wife had told me, "You won't be any good at this, honey." And I'm really an introvert. I may not sound it like today, but I'm timid, and I don't like to meet people and, "Hi, Joe," this or that. Little tell you, I just don't like that kind of thing. So in the year I had to go to school, I sold 2 houses, one to my daughter and one to the guy across the street. It was a total flop, I wouldn't go door to door or anything, and my wife said, "I told you weren't any good at this."
Did you stay in touch with any of the people that you served with in World War II? Have you stayed friendly?
We did for a few years. I had a couple of good friends. One was named Ellsworth from Ohio, and another one was Simmons from Pennsylvania. And we used to go on Liberty together because we were 3 that didn't do the drinking. It's just the way I was brought up. I mean, I didn't go out and get drunk and stuff like that. And so, we just sort of got together and went out together. And what we used to do was play pinochle on our times off.
Well, after the war, did you continue to stay in touch with these people?
For quite a few years I did, yes. And one was Bruno Costa in Detroit, and then it sort of stopped corresponding, and Ed Ellsworth too. We stopped corresponding, and I got word that he died at one time. And we had one ship reunion in Norfolk in the early 1990s. I forget when it was, but I went to the ship reunion. And again, because of the fact of not being very outward, I only went to one. I just don't enjoy being with big crowds and not knowing hardly anybody. I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel like I know what to say, or so.
I don't know. I think you do pretty good, at least with us.
But that's been my.
You met Jesse Jewell's wife there, didn't you?
What?
Jesse Jewell's wife, didn't you meet?
Yes. Well, see, Jesse Jewell, the fellow that jumped into the water.
Yeah, the chief petty officer you were telling us about? Yeah.
And he comes from Gainesville.
Oh, I see.
And they named a street after him.
Actually, I think his family in Gainesville, used to be in the chicken processing plant.
Yes.
They were the biggest chicken processing plant in the South. Yeah,
so I met his wife at the, at the reunion, but I found out that he had died, and, well, as a matter of fact, I'm not gonna say that. Anyway, that was the only reunion I went to, so. And then I've lost contact with anybody, since then.
Did you have any other family members either before you or after you, with grandchildren, children that served in the military anywhere?
No. My father was in the First War and the Second War.
Oh, he was?
Yes.
You and your father, what did your father do in the?
Well, my father, I told you, was a cabinet maker, didn't I? No? Oh,
I don't believe you did, but that's
No,
okay.
well, he was an outstanding craftsman. I mean, he was the head cabinet maker of Williamsburg, the restored city from the 50s into the 60s. And I've got 2 albums of the stuff he made. So that when he went into the Army in this First World War, it was down in Maryland at a base down there, I don't remember the name of it. And he never got out of there because they found out he was such a good craftsman. He made furniture for some of the officers. And he did, in the Second World War, he volunteered for the Seabees because of his knowledge of this, and he got in the Seabees, and they found out he was such an expert craftsman, they transferred him to the Navy, and he became a teacher at Norfolk for the entire war.
Wow.
At Norfolk base.
And what was your father's name?
Lewis K. Bullman. And, I mean, he was, not just because he was my father, Lynn knows, he was just an unbelievable craftsman. There isn't anything he couldn't do with his hands.
So you and your father were both serving on active duty in the Navy during
Yes.
World War II at the
Yes.
same time?
Yes, yes.
And how old a man was your father in 42 when you joined the Navy? You were 19?
Well, he died
I
at
believe.
83 and 79.
So he would have been just about 45 then.
Yes, somewhere, you know, I don't know the exact dates, but he died in 79, and he was 83 years old.
I'll say. Okay, I want to give you an opportunity to say anything else you'd like to add, either about the war or just anything at all you want to talk about.
Casablanca, Liberty.
Tell us about Liberty at Casablanca.
Oh, yeah, okay, Lynn, I'd forgotten that one. It isn't really anything, but, you know, you get Liberty, and we went into Casablanca, and the first day, and all these little kids, little boys, you know, I don't know, 7 on up, would hound you, would come up to you and want to buy something, okay, from the United States. And they liked fountain pens, and they liked bed sheets. And you know, we used to have to stamp your name on the bed sheets so they go in the communal laundry on the ship. You'd get your own bed sheets back. And we had these little contour sheets that fit your bunk. Well, you could take one of those into Casablanca and they'd pay you $20 for it. And it was, you know, you had these Allan Bullman always with a stamp all the way down it. And then I was on shore patrol duty on Christmas Day, and I saw my sheet go down the street. And this is the truth. I mean, how it happened, I have no idea. But they bought these things, as many as you could get to them. You know, and it was just where they got the money, but they have dollars by the handful. And I guess that people didn't have, you know, good clothing or anything, and they just would hound you to buy something.
Very funny. Like seeing your sheet going down the street.
Yeah, I mean, I still can't believe it, but it happened.
One of the things you touched on, and you're going to have to forgive me because I was Army, but we slept with our weapons, literally slept with our weapons in the Army. And you said that you were talking about weapons, and you said we didn't have very many. Did not every member of your crew have a weapon?
Oh, no. No, the only weapons they actually had were Colt 45s, and they were used for gangway watch when you were in port. When you were, you know, the petty officers would stand gangway watch when you were up against a pier or a wharf, so that anybody that came aboard, you could ask them what they were there for, and we would wear a Colt 45.
Did your ship have any armament at all, as far as any weaponry at all?
Oh, yeah.
What type of weaponry? Did you have
Well,
the sight? You told us about the hedgehogs, I think, and you
Yeah,
told
yes,
us about
yeah,
the
and depth
depth
charges,
charges, of
yes.
course. But
In fact, where we slept in the aft ship, underneath us were 80 300-pound depth charges, so that if you ever got hit, you wouldn't have to worry about it. And our sister ship, the Farquhar, Farquer, I think, AR or something, was hit by a torpedo at noontime, broke in half, and everybody was lost. The entire ship was just completely.
the whole crew was
The
lost?
whole crew. And one other thing we did, these things come to me. At the very end, when the Germans were on their last legs, we had the US had deciphered their code for their submarines called Enigma. In fact, they captured a submarine and got their codes. So they knew that the Germans were going to put a big final push on submarines in the North Atlantic, because one of the routes that they had for convoys was to Russia, to supply Russia. And so what they were gonna do was put submarines all across the North Atlantic and sink as many ships as they could. So they sent DEs out there with the idea of meeting these ships and trying to sink them.
And for the record, what are DEs?
Destroyer escorts, the US.
So that's what your ship was, a DE is what they called it?
DE, yeah.
Okay.
DE
I just want to
142.
clarify if somebody else is watching.
DE 142.
Right.
And so we were up in that, and it's cold up in the North Atlantic, and so we didn't, that's when our sister ship was sunk. But we didn't get any action up there. We had one other experience, which is kind of funny. When we took the dead pilot to Newfoundland, we had to come back and rejoin the ships, in up there in Newfoundland. And we were by ourselves coming back, and suddenly they got a blip on the radar. And, it was night, black as night. And they get this nice radar blip, and, everybody went to general quarters, and we're coming along, getting closer to this blip. And we get real close, everybody's at general quarters, and we had one floodlight on the after deck for, if you wanted to see. They flashed it on, and it was a little iceberg. Everybody was.
So during the war, for the you said 2.5 years or
Yeah,
3.5
2 years, 4 months.
that you were
32
aboard.
months total, but I was
Did
on
you
the ship.
lose any members of your crew?
Yes, we lost one, and we were never, the only battle we were in was that Mediterranean and the submarine. But we were leaving Casablanca, and I don't remember which trip it was, and we had obviously a whaleboat that they used to swing up on davits, and hang on the after deck. I don't know whether you could see it on a picture or not. And we had, for some reason, the whaleboat had been used. I can't remember for what reason. We hadn't left Casablanca yet, but we were in the harbor, and I don't remember the reason. And so whaleboat came along the side, and they lower the hooks from the davits and pick it up. Well, this one young man was up there helping to get the whaleboat up, and one of the block and tackles broke and hit him in the head and just killed him instantly.
Oh, yeah.
And his name was Han, his last name was Han. I don't remember his first name, but that's the only death we had. We had one other fella get appendicitis, and they had to fly him back to land.
Did you have any Marines on the ship with you?
No.
No Marines.
This is too small. 9 officers and 200 men.
So you didn't have a brig then, I take it?
No, we didn't have a brig, no. We had a medic, was our doctoring fella, so I guess I don't have any more anecdotes to talk about, do I?
I remember you said when you passed over the equator, they had
Oh, yeah, they
a
had that
right of passage.
usual hazing thing that when you cross the equator. I have a big plaque that I crossed the equator. I don't remember when it was even,
I actually read something today that said, along the equator, you have exactly 12 hours of sunlight and 12 hours of night
Yeah.
every single day of the year.
Yeah,
And it
yeah.
never changes.
Yeah, as I say, it was
Right.
just one of the happenings.
That was
Yeah.
interesting. Tony, did you have anything
No.
you wanted to ask? Let me just see if there's anything. Would it be possible for us to make a copy of those
Of course,
3 pages of
of
your book
course.
and the
Of
photograph?
course. I hope I haven't bored you or
Not at
anything.
all, not at
No.
all. Thank you very much.
Well, it's 65 years and I guess I don't have Alzheimer's yet.
No, sir, you do not.
Okay, well, thank you.
Well, thank you very much
Thank
for
you
giving
very
me the
much.
chance, and my daughter is the one that did it all.
Good for you.